Hi everyone and welcome back to another video. This video is going to be slightly different as I'll actually be talking about my journey in science. In primary school and secondary school, I was pretty much an all-rounder. I tended to get good grades in the different sciences, in maths, in English, in history, and so on. For my GCSEs, I actually got all A's and A stars. Now, after my GCSEs, I knew that I had an interest in science, but because I had really amazing teachers in English and history, I also found myself being really interested in these subjects as well. And so for my first year of college, I did biology, chemistry, English literature, maths, mechanics, and music. And for my second year, I whittled that down to biology, chemistry, and English literature. During college, there was a lot of emphasis around trying to determine what kind of career you wanted, so that you can decide what subject you wanted to do at university, if you wanted to go to university. And so at that time, I had decided that I wanted to become a doctor, but just not the doctor that I actually became. I actually wanted to become a medical doctor. And so I sort of went through the application process and the interviews and whatnot, but I didn't have the kind of support and preparation that I needed from my careers services at my college in order to prepare me properly for applying for medicine. And so I was unsuccessful in getting into medicine at the different universities that I applied to. I was offered a position on a neuroscience course at the University of Nottingham. I declined that position because I wasn't 100% sure that that's what I wanted to do. Although ironically, I then went on to do a PhD in neurobiology. So yeah. So at that time, especially during my second year of college, I was pretty certain that I was going to take a gap year and just try and figure out kind of what I wanted to do. I still had an interest in science, but I just wasn't really sure which area of science I wanted to study, basically. So yeah, I was pretty much set on taking a gap year after college, and then results day came for my A levels, and I did pretty well. I got 2 A stars and a B, so that was in biology, chemistry, and English literature. And from those results, I kind of looked at the paper and said, you know what? I really enjoyed biology and I really enjoyed chemistry. I want to do a course in biochemistry. That was literally my thought process on results day. So here in the UK, we have what's called a clearing system. So on results day, it's possible and very likely that a number of universities will have places on different courses that haven't been filled. And so once you get your results, you can contact these different universities and see if they would like to give you a position on this course. And so that's exactly what I did. I decided that I wanted to do biochemistry, and so I looked online for universities in London, as that's where I was based, that still had places available on a biochemistry course. And I found a place at Queen Mary University and accepted the offer and started there. And yeah, I really enjoyed my course. I really enjoyed learning about gene regulation, about how proteins are made, about protein structure and function in healthy systems, and then also protein dysfunction in an unhealthy system or in disease. But you know, after my first year and some of my second year, I wasn't 100% sure what kind of career I wanted from this. And so I took it upon myself to see if I can gain experience outside of my university, outside of my course, in a different area of science, which would maybe open my eyes to what kind of career I wanted. And so between the summer of my second year and third year, I worked as a research assistant at Imperial College. This was in the Department of Investigative Medicine. This was an unpaid position, but I was working part-time during this, so money wasn't necessarily an issue for me. So this research assistant position was basically me shadowing and assisting a PhD student during their project, which consisted of determining if the presence of short fatty acids within the gut would affect the release of hormones from the brain which control appetite. This was a valuable experience for me because this was the sort of first instance where I was doing, literature research. This was the first time that I had experience in a research lab as well. It was my first and only experience working with mice and rats. It was my first experience doing cell and tissue culture as well. I really learned a lot from this experience, and I feel like in my PhD applications, which I'll talk about a bit later on, this was, I think, one of the crucial things that helped me get a position. So after the summer placement, I went back to university for my third year, in which I did my final year research project, and this was in the field of neurobiology. This project involved cloning a vasopressin oxytocin type neuropeptide precursor from a starfish, and actually formed the basis for what would be my PhD project. I finished this project, I went on to do my exams, and I graduated with a first class, which was great. But I still wasn't 100% sure what kind of career I wanted afterwards. But my dad, as a true Nigerian man, had other plans. If you don't know, in a Nigerian household, you can either be a doctor of any kind, a lawyer, or an engineer. Those are the three options that are available to you in a Nigerian household growing up. So when I was even graduating, at my graduation, my dad would tell every single person, oh, I'm just waiting for her to do a PhD. She needs to do a PhD. She did so well for her undergrad. She needs to do a PhD. I'm telling you, I heard this over 10 times during that graduation day, that at one point I just snapped, and I turned around to my dad and I said, just stop telling me that I need to do a PhD. Like, I don't want to do a PhD. Do not tell me this ever again. And my dad is the kind of person who will tell you what he would like for you, and if you do not agree, he will just back off. He'll be like, that's okay, that's fine, do you, and just wait to sort of see what happens. But he will make it very clear what he wants. But he's the kind of person who's just like, at the end of the day, I have to make my own decision, basically. After my graduation, I don't know, I feel like I was just over science. I was definitely over studying. I was over exams. I was just over everything, and I just needed some time away. And so I decided that I would continue working part-time for a while in order to save up money, and then just go abroad for a couple of months and travel and just live life. Like, that's literally what I wanted to do at the time. I went to Colombia and Guatemala for 3 months by myself. I taught English and I traveled, and honestly, it was one of the best experiences that I've ever had. I did catch malaria when I was there, which was difficult to say the least. It was not something that I would like to go through again, 100%. But in total, if I had to do it all over again, I would, because it was such an amazing experience. That year that I had off, it really gave me time to really think about what I liked about science and how that could be translated into a kind of career. And so going through my list of things that I enjoyed about science, there was something that really stood out for me, and that was gaining knowledge, being able to really explore one area of science down to its depth. And for me, the only career or next step where I could explore this interest that I had was research. Now, because I had been working part-time during my bachelor's degree, I was using the money to support myself, but because I was living at home, I was actually able to use that money towards paying my student tuition. And so by the time I finished my undergrad, I didn't have any kind of student debt. So for me, it made no sense at all to do a master's for a year and incur a debt for 1 year. Like, to me, that just didn't make sense. The next option was doing a PhD. And so I went looking. I will be 100% honest and say that because I only had a bachelor's and not a master's degree, in many cases, I wasn't as competitive for certain PhD projects or programs. But with that being said, there were a number of PhD positions where people with bachelor's degrees could still apply to. And after my applications to PhD programs, I ended with 2 PhD offers, one in chemical engineering and one in neurobiology. I know they are very different, but yeah, those were 2 of my interests at the time. With the chemical engineering position, that was based in Birmingham, which is not in London. This was a PhD position funded for 3 years, and the funding came from a grant that the supervisor had got on her own. For the neurobiology PhD position, I had actually got in touch with one of my professors from my bachelor's degree. He was actually the supervisor that I had for my final year research project. I initially got in touch with him to get his advice on how to apply for different PhD positions, and that was very helpful. But some time after that, he got in touch with me to say that he saw an advertisement for some funding for a PhD position, and this was through the Society for Experimental Biology, and they actually only fund one person per year. So he was like, I'm not super optimistic, but we can go ahead and apply for this together, and you can do a PhD with me. And so we prepared the materials that were needed for this application, and we submitted it and just sort of left it and didn't really think much of it. Then they got back to us and said that they wanted to interview me, and this interview consisted of a presentation where I would present what this proposed PhD project would be, and then it would also consist of a formal interview. I gave the presentation, and what was good about that was that the work that I did during my 3rd year research project formed the foundation, or one of the first results for this particular PhD project. So I could sort of say, this is what I had done as an undergrad, this is where this particular project is right now, and this is what I'm hoping to do if I'm able to pursue a PhD. And so after that was the formal interview. And I don't really remember much about that particular interview, except for one question that was asked. So the question was, you have a bachelor's degree, but no master's. We have other candidates who have master's degrees. What makes you as competitive as them for this funding? And my response to this particular question was that not only did I do a 3rd year research project during my undergrad degree, but I was proactive enough to find a research assistant position that I undertook during the summer, where I was actually able to see the day-to-day life of a PhD student. And so it gave me a realistic view of what a PhD entailed. And I think that response, coupled with my general performance for that interview, was enough, because they offered me funding for my PhD. This particular funding was for 4 years instead of 3 years like the chemical engineering program. Because I applied for this funding and successfully secured it, this would definitely look better on my CV compared to going on a PhD program that already had funding available. In addition to this, the funding through the Society for Experimental Biology also allowed me to go to their conferences every single year, and this was paid for by them. And this was a great way for me to network with other scientists as well. So after weighing the pros and cons of the chemical engineering PhD position and the neurobiology PhD position, I felt that for me, the best choice would be to go with the neurobiology PhD position. In terms of the project, in terms of the networking opportunities, in terms of the career opportunities, and also because this particular program was based in London rather than Birmingham, I was able to keep my social life as it was, be around friends and family. So that definitely had a big part to play in it as well. And so there we have it. This was my journey all the way up to starting my PhD. Stay tuned, and I'll see you soon. Bye.